Hey YouTube, it's Dimitri from BiancoLand, and today we're just going to do a quick BiancoLand property, farming, beekeeping update here. So we're just going to cover it all. So to start off with here, sprinklers are up and running. The yard looks terrible, as you can see in this photo. There's a ton of crabgrass. I'm working on this, but the sprinklers are up and running, which is a good sign. I also have a bunch of Zoysia grass coming. So for the side of the property, we're gonna try to put in some Zoysia around these little crepe myrtles, but I wanna try the Zoysia. It's more expensive in general. This is just kind of a testing site. Zoysia is supposed to be better for weed control, but in general, pretty happy with the sprinklers up and running. I only had to fix one issue this time. The bird feeder is doing great. We're getting all kinds of birds. And as you can see in this photo, this is a red-bellied woodpecker. It has only come, I believe, once, maybe twice, but we're getting a ton of different types of birds on the bird feeder. It's working out great. It's bringing in the birds. The cats love watching them. Anyways, into the garden here, our catnip is growing like crazy, which is awesome. This one was basically a volunteer plant in my compost pile. It got pretty big last year. So I dug it off the side of the compost pile and planted it in this bed, but it is booming now in the spring. My peas have been crazy. I had a bunch of peas that survived from last year, but we also have these new purple shelling peas that I planted. They're coming up pretty strong, so I'm excited about them. This is the pecan tree. So I was a little nervous. We bought this pecan tree last year and it was pretty pricey. I think it was like $120, something like that. 110, I don't know. It was over $100 though for this tree. And then they said it kind of died and they didn't think it was still alive. And then it came back and it had been growing for I think a few weeks. And then I purchased it. So I was nervous it wasn't gonna make it. They also don't leave until late April. So finally here towards middle to end of April, we're getting some leaves now from the buds, but the tree is growing. So fingers crossed it continues to grow well. And then these are the two live oaks. Well, I guess technically three. The two though on the right, the one in the middle and the one on the right, were transplanted at the same time. I rescued them from a neighbor's house who didn't want them because, quote unquote, the nuts will bring animals and they don't want animals. I don't know, kind of different, but anyways, these transplanted amazing. A little worried about them this spring as they lost their leaves and then they turned kind of red, which is just all the new baby leaves coming on. And now they're into full bloom here and they look pretty dense and beautiful. I did go through the centers of them and cut out some of the crossing branches and try to remove some of the dead stuff if there was any there. The third dead tree on the left I transplanted a few weeks after these two, and this one was so large that it was a challenge to get it. I had to have a neighbor help me with a tractor to move it to my property. But what you can't see here is that there's actually some shoots that are coming off of it at the trunk. And so I'm gonna let those grow and hopefully they get big enough to turn into a full tree. And then I'm slowly cutting back some of the dead stuff on top, but I'm kind of using this dead tree parts to help shade the live tree parts so that it will protect it from some of the elements. And then finally here is my beloved apricot tree. I've wanted an apricot tree for a long time. My grandmother has a really big apricot tree, and as a kid we'd always pick them and she would make jams from them. So I'm a huge fan of apricots. I wasn't sure I could grow one in Texas due to the heat. We will see. I purchased this with all the other fruit trees we'll talk about here this last fall. They wintered well. Here's a few of the apricots. And here's what the little tree looks like. This photo was taken probably a week or two ago. The tree is getting much larger though. You can see on the tips of the branches, it's like red or orange. This is the new growth that's coming in the tree. It continues to turn orange and then it grows and it turns green as it matures and then it sprouts again and it keeps pushing more of this orange new growth. So I'm excited the tree is doing well. And then to dive in here to a little bit of the gardening, this is bee balm and lemon balm, I believe. The one in the middle is related to the mint family, which I think is lemon balm. And then the ones on the left corner here with the thin leaves, and there's some here on the bottom right, they're volunteer plants, and this is bee balm. The bumblebees absolutely love it. My honeybees don't seem to really care, but I'm excited this bed is naturally kind of growing. In the kind of dirt spot here on the right. We also have some carrots I planted, which should be coming up fairly soon. And then the other plants here, so just doing a quick overview, these are all different types of beans in the background here at the top of the photo. And then towards the bottom right, there's some weeds, but there's also a couple plants if you look carefully. I believe these are Minnesota midget cantaloupes I've planted, so I'm hoping these grow. The weeds on the right you see, I haven't filled in any of that bed with dirt, or like I haven't maintained it, haven't pulled the weeds. I'll probably come in and weed eat it, maybe rototill it a little bit. I don't know, but we're not planning on planting the whole garden this year. And then my oregano on the left here is doing amazing. Right next to it, you can't really see, but it's a lemon thyme plant. It's doing okay. If it grows, it grows. The oregano, though, has taken me 3 years to really get to this size. I bought it as a tiny little plant from Lowe's. It kind of struggled the first year, produced a few leaves, and then looked like it got covered with dirt and kind of rotted, and I don't know, didn't do so well. On the right side here, this giant bush you see is a rosemary plant. Yeah, I need to trim it back quite a bit, but in general, it's just naturally growing. There's not much effort I have to put into these different herbs growing. I do highly recommend herbs if you live in Northeast Dallas, as they seem to grow fairly good on their own with minimal interaction from you as a gardener. And then here's all of my garlic I planted last fall. It sprouted last fall. I put a bunch of dead grass and mulch over the top of it. And then this spring it really grew big, and it's made it through the entire winter, and it's growing huge. We'll probably harvest it in about a month. You can see in the background some of the lettuce I planted. I never really got around to cutting it, so it's kind of bolted, but I don't mind. We'll let it go. Maybe it'll volunteer plant more lettuce next year or in the fall here. And the honeybees, of course, like that. You should notice here too, all this yellow flowers, all the wild flowers that are growing in the yard. The honeybees love it, so we just let it grow for the most part. And then of course the primrose will be coming in the next wave, which is actually here today, but it's just not in these photos. And then here are the other peas we had. So on the bottom right, those are the purple shelling peas. On the left is the catnip plant, but behind it is a bunch of cilantro that's just self-seeded year after year now. So I'm just gonna let it keep doing its thing. And intertwined with it is a bunch of peas. I've gotten, I don't know, 5-10 pounds of peas maybe off of these plants. There's probably a total of 6 to 12 different pea plants in here, but they've been doing awesome so far. Again, I planted these last year and I covered them with plastic, so they're hanging in there. They've made it a year. It's getting hot. They're starting to die. So I'm hoping these smaller purple shelling peas will take their place. And then the last parts of the garden here you can see are these two little plants towards the left are blueberry plants. The dark green one, the bright green one you see here, that is a blackberry plant. And behind it, I believe, is another blackberry shoot of some sorts, but they're doing awesome. You can see here the flowers from the blackberry plant. They're starting to bloom, the little berries are coming on. I'm pretty excited. I tried growing raspberries multiple times and they just seem to die quickly. I don't know if the ones I buy from Lowe's are diseased or something, but I get them, I pot them, or I put them in beds, and they seem to do okay for the first, I don't know, month or so, and then they just die out. So at this point, we're going to stick with the blueberries and blackberries. This bed's pretty full. We'll see how they kind of do over the next year or two. And this giant vining plant on the right is like a yellow trumpet. It's doing great. The vine in the middle is Wisteria, which I know people say is a massive weed, but I would like to fill this trellis with plants so that it shades the garden behind it. Worst case scenario, we'll cut it out. On the bottom left here, it's kind of hard to see. There's a blackberry plant as well as some type of vining plant, like a trumpet plant of some sort. But anyways, this trellis has taken me a year or two to grow. It's done really amazing. The blueberries are growing great. I mean, we're gonna end up with, I don't know, 5-6 blueberries. Nothing exciting, but we're gonna start slowly trying to get the berries going, get the vines going, just getting this bed established. And then finally here, just going through the fruit trees. This is a peach tree. It has leaves. It still has a ton of buds on it, so it hasn't fully leaved like all the other trees. It has produced some really pretty pink flowers. But peaches, fingers crossed, those do well this year. The main goal of all the fruit trees, though, is to get large, established trees, and then maybe next year or the year after we'll really focus on fruit production. This is the Gala apple tree. This is the jujube, which is a Chinese date, is what they call it. Has little thorns by the berries. Again, I've heard they grow amazing here in Texas. The fruit I'm hoping tastes good. I don't recall if I've had one or not. The guy that I purchased this tree from had a massive one there, but I don't believe we tried it. Some of my Chinese colleagues say they're amazing and they love them, and you can actually dry the fruit themselves, so I'm hoping this will be a good investment, but we'll see in the long run. And then I have some Asian pear trees because I love Asian pears. So this Asian pear is a single variety. It's doing okay. I ended up having to cut a bunch of the pears off of it because I want it to grow large as a tree. As you can see, it's kind of like a stick with one little branch. We want it to boom, we want it to grow. That's the goal this year, but it would be nice to get 1 or 2 pears off of it. And you can see here, here's one of the pears. And here's a cool hornet on here that's pollinating and doing its business. Again, I don't really mind the hornets as they do pollinate just like bees. And then here's the 3-in-1 Asian pear. It's got 3 different varieties grafted onto one, but they all kind of fruit in the late fall, so they should cross-pollinate each other. And then I have that single variety one we just looked at, and one of those single varieties is also one of the 3 that's grafted on this tree. And then I planted 2 olive trees from Lowe's. The first one died, so I don't know. It just didn't do well. I think they get too much water here, and it also gets fairly cold. This one survived though, so fingers crossed it does better. It is flowering in this picture. It's kind of hanging in there. I don't know. We'll see if it grows. If it does, great. If not, I'm not too concerned. And here are the really pretty flowers that grow on an olive tree. So who knows? Maybe we'll end up with some olives this year, but we'll just kind of give it a shot. This is my Medley plum tree, so I'm really excited to have this as well. I've never really grown plums, but it's done really well, and the leaves have come out on it and had tons of flowers. And then I went back and I cut off all of the fruit except for one. So here's a shot of the one fruit. I couldn't quite get it in focus with my phone camera, but it's doing fairly well as a plant. Again, the goal here is to tree growth, not to produce fruit. And then this is my assortment of dead and dying plants as well as other plants I've purchased. You'll see on the very top part, there's my orange tree, my Cara. The first year I killed my lime and lemon tree by overwatering, I believe. And this one almost died, and then it came back, and now it's growing like a bush and not a tree. I don't know if it'll survive in the long run or what's going to happen to it, but we'll just leave it in its pot and keep watering it slowly. Again, in the wintertime, I was watering it like once a week. This is kind of what I read online in some different areas. This was completely wrong. My potted plant indoors needed to be watered probably twice for the entire winter. This winter I've watered it probably 2 times, maybe 3 if I'm pushing it. In the middle here are a bunch of dead dogwoods. Unfortunately, they don't grow well in Dallas. They grew in the front yard in the spring last year or the year before, and then the heat hit and it basically killed them. And so I rescued some of them. Some of them died during transplant. One of them was still kicking this spring, but again, it just died. I don't think dogwoods do well in Dallas, which is kind of surprising to me. And then in this blue pot, the top one has some green garlic scapes. It's grown now, I think it's 2nd or 3rd year. I just leave it in the pot, it makes it all winter. I just keep watering it here and there and it keeps growing. And then the bottom pot used to be a tomato plant that died, and I believe the green in there is just some weeds. And then the cool pots in the front here are flowers that need to be transplanted. I bought them last fall. They've wintered well in their pots. I don't recall what the white pot one is, but it has some cool big flowers on it. And then these 2 little black pots on the ground. These are crepe myrtles. Crepe myrtles grow amazing in Dallas. It's like a weed, it grows great, and they produce tons of flowers, which the bees really love. And that leads us here to the final wrap up of April, the honeybees. The honeybees have done amazing. Beatrice, yes, the second, the furthest hive that's massive. She's done awesome. She was booming, and then they've started producing tons and tons of brood, and I've been checking in on them, and all of a sudden they're running low on food. I realized Catherine, who's the middle hive with the brown box, she was a cutout rescue from a neighbor who had it in a water box. It was a tiny hive. This winter was fairly warm. She survived the winter. I took some of the brood and some of the honey from Beatrice II's hive and moved it into Catherine's. They're still alive, they're still kicking. If they make it, great. If not, I'm not super concerned. And then finally, the far right hive is Queen Anne. And again, I checked her, she's still booming. I found her in the hive this last week when I was doing a hive check. They're still growing, they're still making babies, but they seem to be out of food. So I've kicked into kind of feeding Catherine and Anne just to get them through the spring into like the main flow here, get the numbers up, get the population stable, and then I'm going to cut all feeding and just let them do their own thing through the rest of the summer and hopefully the fall. Anyways, thanks for watching and thanks for listening to BiancoLand's April update. And as always, until next time.